My dad says he can't afford ice cream today, little Violet said, eyes wide and lips trembling, as she stood next to the cart with her tiny hand wrapped around Marcus Langford's calloused fingers. Marcus sighed, crouching beside her. It's not that I don't want to, sweetheart, it's just. He glanced at the price board on the side of the cart and clenched his jaw. We've got to save today, all right. She nodded, trying to be brave, but Marcus saw the disappointment flicker in her eyes. This wasn't the life he wanted for her. After Krista left them 2 years ago, he'd been doing everything he could, working construction jobs during the day and cleaning offices at night. Still, it barely covered rent, groceries, and her school tuition. Ice cream was a luxury now. Hey, he said, ruffling Violet's curls. We'll come back another day, I promise. As they turned to leave the park, Violet skipping ahead with her backpack bouncing, Marcus caught sight of a woman sitting on a bench near the fountain. Her shoulders were shaking, her face hidden in her hands. She wasn't just wiping away tears, she was breaking down. On instinct, Marcus walked over. Hey, are you okay? He asked gently. The woman looked up, startled, her tear-streaked face flushed. She was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made Marcus forget, for a second, that he was covered in sawdust and sweat. Her eyes were red, and her hands trembled as she tried to fix her hair. I am fine, she said quickly, but her voice cracked. Sorry, I didn't mean to. She shook her head. It's stupid. It's not stupid if it made you cry, he said plainly. She blinked at him, caught off guard by his honesty. I'm Marcus, he added, and that little girl over there pretending not to watch us is my daughter, Violet. The woman gave a watery laugh and wiped her cheek. I'm Penelope, Penelope Sinclair. Nice to meet you, Penelope Sinclair, he said, giving a small nod toward the bench. Mind if I sit? She shook her head, and he lowered himself beside her, their knees almost touching. He didn't press her to talk, just waited. After a moment, she whispered, My father passed away last night, and at the funeral this morning, my uncle who should have been there for support started talking about money, about the company, about control. Her jaw clenched. He doesn't think I can handle it. Marcus didn't know what company she meant, and he didn't ask. What mattered was that she was hurting. I'm sorry, he said. Losing a parent changes everything. Penelope turned to him, surprised. You've lost someone. My mom, a few years back, he said. Then my ex left, took off, said parenting wasn't for her, so yeah, get it, people suck sometimes. She gave a soft, shaky laugh. Yeah, they really do. Violet ran up then, tugging on Marcus's hand. Daddy, can we stay here a little longer? Marcus looked at Penelope. She nodded. Sure, kiddo, he said. Penelope watched the way Marcus spoke to Violet, gentle, patient, loving. Her chest ached with the kind of longing she hadn't felt in years. They sat there for over an hour, talking about everything and nothing. Penelope didn't mention money again, and Marcus didn't treat her like someone rich or important. He didn't even seem to realize who she was. And for the first time in days, she felt like herself, not Penelope Sinclair the heiress, but just Penelope. When the sun dipped lower, Marcus stood. We should head back, it's spaghetti night. Violet cheered. Penelope smiled. That sounds nice. He hesitated. You hungry? She blinked. What? I mean, if you don't have plans, you could join us. It's nothing fancy. Probably overcooked noodles and too much garlic. Penelope laughed. Honestly, that sounds perfect. Marcus seemed surprised that she said yes, but he smiled and nodded. All right then, we live just around the corner. Penelope followed them to a small apartment building. The place was old but clean, and Violet proudly gave her a tour of the 2-bedroom space, showing her the crayon drawings on the fridge and her collection of plastic tiaras. Dinner was simple, just like he said, pasta, salad, and toast, but it was warm, real, filled with laughter and stories. Penelope hadn't had dinner like that in years. When it was time to leave, she lingered at the door. "Thank you," she said softly, "for today." Marcus shrugged, "Didn't do much." "You did," she said. "You saw me, and you didn't ask for anything." He looked confused. "Why would I?" She smiled and shook her head. "Good night, Marcus." "Good night, Penelope." As she disappeared down the hallway, Violet tugged on her dad's sleeve. "Is she gonna come back?" she asked. Marcus looked at the door for a long second. "I don't know, Peanut, maybe." But somehow, deep down, he hoped she would. And she did. The next day, and the day after that, Penelope started showing up at the park more and more. Violet would run to her, hug her like she was already family. Penelope brought strawberry muffins, little trinkets, and once, a sketchbook for Violet because she'd seen her drawing in the dirt with a stick. "You really don't have to keep bringing stuff," Marcus said one afternoon, as they sat on the same bench. "I want to," she said. "Besides, Violet's easy to spoil." "You're gonna ruin her," he teased. Penelope looked at him, her voice quieter. "I think she's already perfect." They both fell into silence, watching Violet chase butterflies. Penelope turned to him. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why are you so kind to me? You don't even know who I am." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What kind of question is that?" "I just mean, I'm not," she hesitated. "You're you," he said simply, "and I like who you are." Penelope stared at him, heart thudding. No one had ever said that to her, not without wanting something. She looked down at her hands. "I think I'm starting to fall for you, Marcus." He froze. Then slowly, he reached over and took her hand. "I think I'm falling too," he said quietly. And just like that, everything changed. Neither of them said it out loud, not yet, but something real had begun. Something neither of them saw coming. Something worth holding onto. 3 days after that shared spaghetti dinner, Marcus stood in the worn hallway of his apartment, wiping drywall dust off his forearms with an old rag before unlocking the door. Violet's chatter filtered from inside, her voice high and excited. "Daddy, she's here again." Penelope was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by uncapped markers and construction paper. She looked up, laughing as Violet held up a cut-out paper crown with crooked gems glued on. "She says I'm her royal advisor now," Penelope said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Marcus dropped his bag by the door. "You're brave to accept that position." Penelope grinned, figured someone should help steer the kingdom. He stepped further into the room. "You didn't have to pick her up today." "I was nearby," she said, standing. "I called the school, cleared everything. They know me now." He nodded slowly, unsure how to feel about someone stepping into his routines so easily. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said gently, brushing her hands off on her jeans. "I thought maybe you could use a break." He crossed his arms. "You think I can't handle my kid?" Her face fell. "No, that's not it, I just thought." "I know what you thought," he said, voice rougher than he meant. "But I don't need someone sweeping in and fixing things, didn't ask to be fixed." Penelope's eyes flashed. "I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm trying to be here. You're the one who invited me in, remember?" Violet looked between them, quiet now. Marcus exhaled, jaw flexing. "You're right, I'm sorry." Penelope nodded once, then knelt to Violet's level. "Think your dad and I could talk for a minute." Violet gave a tiny nod, eyes wide as she picked up her markers and wandered to her room. Marcus leaned against the edge of the kitchen counter. "I didn't mean to snap." Penelope slowly walked over. You didn't, not really. But Marcus, you've been doing this alone for a long time. I get that, but I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to help carry it. He stared at her, unsure what to say. She took a breath. I've spent most of my life around people who use each other for leverage. You don't. That's why I come here. I don't want to control anything. I like being part of it. His throat tightened. I've never had someone offer that before. Then maybe it's time you did. He watched her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. She smiled faintly. Neither are you. The next few days passed in a rhythm Marcus hadn't realized he missed. Penelope started showing up without fanfare, a knock on the door, a coffee cup in hand. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Other times she helped Violet with homework or read to her on the couch while Marcus caught up on bills. It wasn't until Saturday that everything shifted again. They were at the community center for Violet's art showcase. Her drawing of a castle made from cardboard and glitter glue was taped up beside the juice station. Marcus stood beside Penelope, watching Violet proudly explain her masterpiece to another kid. She worked hard on that. She's got your focus, Penelope said softly. He glanced at her. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe, but I've seen enough to guess. Before he could respond, a sharp voice cut through the room. Penelope. They both turned. A tall man in a tailored navy suit stood at the entrance, flanked by two others. His expression was tight, his eyes flicking between her and Marcus with barely concealed disdain. Penelope stepped forward. Uncle Charles. Charles Sinclair's gaze swept the room. I've been trying to reach you. You've ignored every call. I've had other things on my mind. Clearly, he said, eyes narrowing at Marcus. Marcus didn't move. You know each other. Charles ignored him. Your father's will is being contested. The board is demanding clarity on your intentions. And you're here playing house with a construction worker in a community center. Penelope's eyes burned. He's not part of this. You're living in a fantasy, Charles snapped. You don't belong in this world, Penelope, and he certainly doesn't belong in yours. Marcus stepped forward. I think you should leave. Charles looked him over, then turned back to Penelope. You have 48 hours to show up at the estate and sign the transition documents. If you don't, the board will assume you're forfeiting control. Penelope crossed her arms. Maybe am. Charles laughed without humor. Don't be foolish. You've been groomed for this your whole life. She didn't reply. Charles gave Marcus a final glare before turning on his heel and walking out. The room was quiet again. Marcus looked at her. What was that? Penelope's jaw clenched. That was my uncle, and now, you know. He studied her, voice low. You're not just someone who needed a friend at the park, are you? No, she said. My family owns Sinclair Holdings. My father was chairman. I inherited majority control. He nodded, backing up a step. So, when you said your uncle didn't think you could handle things. He's been trying to take control since my father got sick. He wanted the company, and now he's furious that it's mine. Marcus exhaled. Why didn't you tell me? Because you looked at me like I was a person, not a headline, she said. I didn't want to lose that. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he glanced toward Violet, who was still chatting with another parent. I have to think, he said finally. Penelope nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Understand. She left quietly, and for the first time in weeks, Marcus felt the weight of solitude again. That night, Violet asked, Is Penelope mad at us? Marcus tucked her in, brushing her hair back. No, sweetheart, she just has some things to figure out. Violet frowned. Can we help her? He stared at the ceiling for a moment. Maybe. The next morning, he stood outside the Sinclair estate gates, unsure how he'd gotten there. But he was done pretending he didn't care. And if Penelope had a war to fight, he wasn't letting her do it alone. The Sinclair estate loomed ahead massive wrought iron gates, a sweeping drive lined with marble lion statues, and a manor larger than anything Marcus had ever seen outside of a magazine. His boots crunched over gravel as he walked toward the front entrance, heart steady but heavy. He wasn't here for answers, he was here for her. A sharply dressed man opened the door, eyeing Marcus's jeans and flannel shirt with thinly veiled disdain. "May I ask your business?" "I'm here for Penelope," Marcus said calmly. The man hesitated. "She's in a meeting." "Then I'll wait." He stepped inside without permission. The foyer was cathedral-like, with arched ceilings and chandeliers throwing gold across polished floors. Marcus didn't look up. He didn't care about the wealth. He only cared about the woman fighting alone behind some closed door. He didn't have to wait long. Voices echoed from a nearby room, tense, clipped. "You'll destroy everything your father built if you hand control to a board of strangers," Charles was saying. "I'd rather that than let you hollow it out from the inside," Penelope replied, her voice firm but strained. Marcus pushed the door open. Penelope stood at the head of a long mahogany table, surrounded by suited men and women. Her posture was rigid, but her eyes widened when she saw him. Charles's lip curled. "This is hardly the place for." "I'm not here for you," Marcus said. He looked at Penelope. "Came because I should have stood beside you yesterday. I should have asked what you needed instead of pulling away." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why now?" "Because, I realized, don't care if you own half the city or none of it. Care about the woman who knelt on my living room floor gluing paper crowns with my daughter. The woman who didn't flinch when she saw how I live. Who stayed." Charles scoffed, touching but irrelevant. Marcus didn't look away from Penelope. "If you want to keep fighting, I'll be there. If you want to walk away from all of this, I'll still be there." Penelope's hands slowly unclenched at her sides. "You don't belong in this room," Charles snapped. "Neither do you," Penelope said coldly. "Get out." There was a beat of stunned silence. "What?" Charles said, his voice rising. "You've undermined me for years. You bullied my father when he was sick, and now you're trying to bully me. I won't let you. You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said. "I'm removing you from the board, effective immediately." Charles's face darkened. "You don't have the votes." "I do," she said, then turned to the others seated at the table. "Board members, if you still believe in the legacy my father built, then you'll know what needs to happen here." Murmurs rose around the table. A man near the end stood. "I support the motion." So did a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. Her father trusted her. "That's enough for me." In minutes, it was over. Charles walked out stiffly, his jaw tight, his shoulders rigid with fury. Penelope turned to Marcus after the doors shut. "I didn't expect you to come." "I couldn't stay away," he said. "Violet made me promise if you were sad, I'd fix it." "That sounds like her." He stepped closer. "I meant what I said. Whatever comes next, I'm in." Penelope blinked fast, as if the weight of what just happened was catching up to her. "I was terrified you'd disappear when you saw this world." "I'd only disappear if you asked me to," he murmured. She reached up, cupping his face, her fingers roughened by hours of drawing and writing, no doubt. "I don't want to do any of this without you." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was soft, sure, and full of everything they hadn't said yet. When they pulled apart, Penelope really smiled for the first time that day. Would Violet be okay visiting this place? It's not exactly cozy. She'd probably try to turn the ballroom into a blanket fort, Marcus said. I'd help her. He chuckled, brushing his thumb along her cheek. You sure about this, all of it? She nodded. I don't want a life that makes sense on paper. I want one that feels real, and it's the first thing that's felt real in a long time. A knock interrupted them. The silver-haired board member peeked in. Penelope, security needs your signature before Mr. Sinclair is formally escorted off the premises. Penelope nodded. I'll be right there. She looked back at Marcus. Wanna come with me? Lead the way. They walked side by side down the hall, past portraits and polished floors, toward a future neither of them had planned for but both wanted more than anything. Not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. 3 weeks later, the Sinclair estate no longer felt like a fortress. The walls still stood tall, the marble still gleamed, but the air had changed. It no longer echoed with tension and cold formalities. Now, it carried the scent of pancakes from the kitchen and the sound of Violet's giggles echoing down the grand staircase. Penelope adjusted the strap of her dress as she stepped into the sunlit garden, where rows of white chairs and trailing jasmine garlands curved around a small stone fountain. A soft breeze rustled the petals of the peonies lining the walkway. In the distance, Violet twirled in a pale blue dress, her paper crown replaced with a new one made of silk and gold thread. Marcus had made it with his own hands, using wire and patience and love. Penelope found him near the arbor, sleeves rolled, securing the last of the floral arrangements. He looked up as she approached, wiping his palms on his trousers. You're early, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. I couldn't stay inside, she replied. It didn't feel right not seeing it come together. He stepped back to take in the view. You did this, all of it, it's beautiful. I think we did it, she said, brushing a fallen petal from his shoulder. You gave it roots. He tilted his head. You sure this is what you want? Your world's changed a lot. She laced her fingers through his. I don't want a world that's polished but empty. I want one where my daughter dances barefoot on marble and you kiss me when I burn the toast. He laughed, low and warm. You're the one who can't cook, huh? I was starting to think Violet inherited that from me. She absolutely did not, Penelope said, eyes dancing. But I'll bake, and you'll fix what I burn, and Violet will keep us from turning the kitchen into a disaster zone, or contribute to it. Either way, it'll be ours. Marcus leaned in, his voice quieter now. I never thought I'd have a second chance at something like this. Penelope's gaze softened. Maybe you didn't get a second chance. Maybe this is just your first real one. Steps crunched on the gravel behind them, and Penelope turned as Lydia, her father's longtime assistant, approached with a tablet and a raised brow. The press release is ready, Lydia said. Penelope took the tablet, scanned the document, and handed it back. Release it. You're sure? Lydia asked. Very. As Lydia walked away, Marcus raised an eyebrow. What press release? She turned to him. I'm stepping down. His eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? I'm keeping my shares, but I'm leaving the daily operations. My father built Sinclair Holdings to support families, communities. Somewhere along the line, that got lost. And what will you do instead? She glanced toward the fountain. I bought the old community center. The board was going to sell it, but I made an offer they couldn't refuse. Marcus stared at her. You bought it. I didn't want to just write checks. I want to build something that matters. Art programs, tutoring, job support, real things, and maybe I'll teach Violet how to smear glue properly. He shook his head slowly, a quiet awe in his expression. You're not who I thought you were. Penelope stepped closer. Neither are you. The music began softly from the speakers near the garden wall. Guests began to take their seats, a mix of Penelope's close associates, a few board members who'd stayed loyal, the families from the neighborhood, and even Marcus's old crew from the construction site, wearing mismatched suits and wide grins. Violet ran up, grabbing Penelope's hand. "It's starting." Penelope crouched, ready to walk down the aisle with me. Violet nodded solemnly. "I practiced." "I know you did." As they stepped onto the path, the rows of guests rose. Penelope's heart pounded, not from nerves but from something deeper, something steady, certain. Marcus stood at the end of the aisle. He wore a dark navy suit, no tie, and a small white rose in his lapel. But it wasn't the clothes that made him look different. It was the way he stood, as if this wasn't just a wedding, but a promise to a life he never thought he'd be allowed to have. When Penelope reached him, Violet slipped between them, taking both their hands. The officiant smiled. "We gather today not to witness the beginning of something new, but to celebrate something that was already written the moment two lives collided in a park neither of them meant to visit." Marcus's voice was rough when he spoke his vows. "I didn't have much when I met you. Not money, not time, just this girl and a will to keep going. But you didn't ask me to give more. You asked me to let you in, and I've never been more grateful for anything in my life." Penelope blinked quickly, then took a breath. "I've spent years surrounded by people who wanted power, position, advantage. But the first time I felt truly seen was when you offered me leftover spaghetti without knowing who I was. You didn't fall in love with Sinclair Holdings. You fell in love with me, and I promise I'll never forget that." Violet grinned, her arms wrapped around both of them. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, their kiss wasn't just passionate, it was full of everything they'd fought for: trust, healing, and the quiet power of choosing each other every day. Later, as the sun dipped and fairy lights blinked on in the trees, Penelope stepped away from the crowd, barefoot in the grass. Marcus found her by the edge of the garden. "Everyone's asking where you disappeared to," he said, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him, just needed a second to breathe it all in. He rested his chin on her shoulder. "You thinking about your dad?" "A little," she said. "I think he'd be proud, not because I held onto the company, but because I let it go." Marcus kissed the side of her neck. "You built something better." She turned to face him fully. "We did." A burst of laughter echoed from the dance floor, where Violet spun in circles with two of Marcus's old crew. Penelope smiled. "She's happy." "She's safe," Marcus added, "and loved." They stood in silence for a long moment, the kind that didn't need filling. Finally, Penelope whispered, "So what now?" Marcus took her hand. "Now we live the life neither of us saw coming." She nodded, eyes shining. "Together." And they did. Not in a perfect world, but in a real one, a world built not from marble or money, but from second chances, quiet strength, and the kind of love that finds you when you least expect it, and refuses to let go. The following spring, the community center finally opened its doors. It didn't look like much from the outside, just a renovated 2-story brick building with a wide porch and a new sign in hand-painted script that read, "The Haven." But inside, it pulsed with life. Children laughed from the art room, teens huddled over laptops in the tutoring wing, and the scent of fresh bread from the kitchen floated down the halls. Marcus stepped back from the bulletin board he just finished hanging, wiping his hands on his jeans. "That's the last of it," he said, looking over at Penelope, who stood near the office door holding a box of books. She set it down carefully, brushing her hair from her face. "We did it." He crossed the room to her, leaned in, and kissed her temple. "You did it." "You built the shelves," she said, "and the desks, and rewired the lighting when the electrician canceled." He grinned. "You bribed me with cinnamon rolls." "You look tired," she said, squeezing his hand. "I wanted to keep you going." They walked through the main hallway together, pausing at the mural Violet had painted with the other children. A sprawling tree with handprints for leaves and a sky filled with stars. It had taken weeks, and Penelope had helped them outline the initial sketch while Marcus had built the frame around the wall to preserve it. Penelope tilted her head. You know, I used to think legacy was about numbers, control, preserving power. You don't anymore. She looked at him. Now, I think legacy is about moments. The kind people remember when everything else fades. They stepped into the kitchen where Violet sat at the center table, tongue poked out as she concentrated on frosting a tray of cupcakes. Her friend Ava sat beside her, carefully placing blueberries on top. The two girls were inseparable lately, and Ava's grandmother, who ran the center's gardening club, watched them from the corner with a fond smile. Is it okay if Violet sleeps over at Ava's tonight? Penelope asked as they stepped outside onto the back patio. They want to finish their comic book. Marcus nodded, as long as she brings her sketchpad back this time. She will, Penelope said, leaning against the railing. They stood in the quiet, watching the sky shift into hues of rose and gold. The center's garden stretched in front of them, blooming rows of wildflowers and herbs. Penelope had started most of the planting herself, and Marcus had built the raised beds with salvaged wood from one of his old job sites. It was funny how the simplest things ended up meaning the most. You know, she said, I got a call today. From who? The city council. They want to recognize the Haven at next month's community gala. They're giving us a grant, enough to expand the after-school program and start vocational workshops. Marcus let out a low whistle. You're not even trying to take over the world, and it's landing in your lap. Penelope laughed. I think the trick is not trying to prove anything anymore. He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes had that same spark they did the day they met, but the weight that used to sit in her shoulders was gone. She stood taller now, lighter, like she'd finally stepped into the life that had been waiting for her all along. I've been thinking about something, he said. She turned to him. What's that? He pulled a small box from his pocket and held it out. Her breath caught. I know you didn't need rescuing, he said. You never did, but I'd like to be the man who stands beside you while you rescue the world anyway. He opened the box. Inside was a delicate ring, simple, elegant, with a single oval diamond set in a band of white gold. No flash, just intention. I don't care where we live, how much we have, or what last name you want to keep. I just want you, every day. Penelope blinked hard, then smiled through the tears gathering in her lashes. You're sure it's me you want? Only you, he said, always. She wrapped her arms around his neck, kissed him slow and deep, and whispered against his lips, then yes. Absolutely yes. They held each other for a long moment, the sun dipping lower behind them, casting the garden in golden light. Later that evening, when Violet returned and saw the ring, she squealed and immediately began designing their wedding invitations using glitter glue and pressed flowers. I want to read something during the ceremony, she said, already pulling out her notebook. Marcus nodded. Of course, sweetheart. Penelope raised an eyebrow. You're not even going to ask what it is. She's your daughter now, too, he said. Might as well get used to surprises. The wedding was held a month later in the community garden under strings of soft white lights. Marcus wore a navy vest and rolled sleeves, and Penelope chose a sleeveless ivory dress with embroidered vines running up the hem. Violet walked between them during the ceremony, holding both their hands as they exchanged vows. No one gave speeches about fortunes or empires. Instead, Violet read a poem she'd written about spaghetti nights and paper crowns. Guests cried, Penelope beamed, and Marcus kissed her like the world had finally lined up just right. Afterward, they danced barefoot under the stars, surrounded by the very people they'd built their life with. Laughter rang out, plates clinked, and music floated into the night air. Marcus leaned in as they swayed beneath the lights. "I never thought I'd have this." "You built this with me," Penelope said. "This is ours." He kissed her palm, then pressed it to his chest. "Then let's never forget how we got here." They didn't. Years later, when Violet was in high school and the Haven had expanded to 3 locations across the city, Penelope still woke up every morning with Marcus's arm around her waist and his breath warm against her cheek. He still brought her coffee in the garden before meetings. She still painted flowers on the walls of the youth rooms. Violet still left glitter trails on every surface she touched. And every night, after the last light in the center flicked off and the world quieted, Marcus would pull her close and say, "Still you. Always." And she would whisper back, "Always."